They called it the Quiet Revolution, and at first the name felt like praise. The new pickups hummed instead of growled, their cabins sealed like submarines and their dashboards lit with slick, glassy interfaces. They could park themselves, map the most efficient route across a flooded county, warm a dog's bed in the rear cab, and summon over-the-air updates while the owner slept. On paper, they were smarter, safer, less polluting, and unstoppable. On paper, that was true. In the garage behind Ed Morales's diner, papers had always mattered less than grease and elbow memory. Ed had learned pickups the old way, by listening to a motor when it first caught, by feeling a suspension speak through his hands, by tracing a wiring loom with a knowing thumb. His customers were farmers, roofers, weekend hunters, people who measured a truck by how long they could keep it running after the warranty expired. Ed kept a scrapyard of legacy parts, a toolbox autographed by oil and soot. He liked the honest unreliability of things that could be made better with a wrench. The first time a new truck rolled into his bay, it was more of a puzzle than a problem. The owner, a young man named Marcus with a fresh collar and calloused hands, had hit a deer on the county road. The bumper crumpled, headlights shattered, but what kept Marcus awake at night was not the metal. It was the message on the touchscreen: service required, do not attempt repair. Authorization NEEDED. The dealer had given Marcus a soft apology and a scheduling window 2 weeks out. We'll pick it up, they'd said, covered under telematic care. Marcus had shrugged, except grief over kids in his car and bills for a truck he used to pull a trailer of pigs meant 2 weeks without income. He wheeled the truck into Ed's shop for a look because that's what you did. You ask a mechanic what's wrong before you ask a court what you can do about it. Ed hooked the diagnostic cable to the OBD port, expecting the streaming hiss of fault codes, the glint of a check engine light, and a path. The tablet flashed, then blinked into a lock screen. Every wire leaving the engine was bundled in a sheath of encoded cloth. The engine laughed with a soft electric whisper. When Ed popped the hood, the air smelled faintly of ozone and glue. The control module was a sealed block, labeled proprietary, service only. There was no port for his venerable analog tools, nothing to clamp to, nothing to turn. A gentle rectangle of light blinked at him like a challenge. He could have towed it away, sold it to a dealership for parts he couldn't use. Instead, he did what mechanics always did when the rules changed. He stared until a patch. He found a tiny access panel behind the glove box, a web of adhesives that came off with a heat gun, and then a second lock that responded to a Bluetooth handshake from a phone number registered to the manufacturer. It wasn't that the parts were impossible to replace. It was that the truck, by design, had closed the path. Word spread in truck towns like wildfire. Owners gathered at feed stores and church potlucks, swapping screenshots of error messages and the number for corporate support. Some called lawyers, some traded hacks in private forums, lines of code that mimicked manufacturer handshakes, apps that pretended to be dealers. Those hacks worked until they didn't. Over-the-air updates arrived like the tide and would, without warning, change the way a clutch was calibrated or the timing on a sensor, and the hack would fail its mimicry. Repair manuals disappeared behind paywalls and strict licensing agreements. Even when an owner had a diagnostic readout, the underpinning software was a closed garden, encrypted, server-verified, and controlled by a company in another state that could and would disable access remotely in the name of warranty, safety, or ecosystem integrity. The trucks themselves were miracles. They had crash avoidance systems that could save a life, adaptive suspensions that converted a pothole into a whisper, and emissions filters that could be tuned by satellite to meet the latest law mid-trip. They were also a web of proprietary dependencies. A shattered headlight required a replacement lamp, one with an embedded microcontroller that had to be authenticated before it would light. Brake pads sent diagnostic pings. A new set had to be paired to the ABS via the manufacturer's cloud. The owner's sense of agency was not only slowly eroded, it was quietly transferred to lines of code in offices he could not access. You could see it in the faces of men like Marcus, in the way they traded resentment for careful acceptance. Some sold and bought older models, carburetors, distributors, things you could fix with stubbornness and a friend. Others paid subscription fees. A growing number financed, authorized repair plans that came with an ode to convenience and a clause about revocation. The real consequence, though, was subtler. It was in the way entire town infrastructures began to bend. Independent garages shrank. Local parts suppliers closed their doors. The knowledge that had once flowed through those grease-stained hands, how to coax a faltering alternator back to life or to jury-rig a connector from a pop bottle and wire, was being cataloged and locked away. Ed refused to be sentimental about the past. He loved efficiency and new. But he also believed that things you own should belong to you, so he began to adapt in his own way. He became a student of the quiet spaces in the trucks, the oversights in their security, the cultural seams that a corporate rollout would miss. He collected the discarded modules that dealers refused to sell, those rendered useless by missing authorizations. He took them home and pried them open like someone reading a foreign language. At night, he scribbled notes and soldered circuits. He found ways to reroute signals, to simulate an authentication by feeding the module an old, static sequence when the manufacturer's server briefly forgot to check. It was cowboy work, fragile, temporary, liable to be erased by the next update, but it let people drive. That quiet rebellion formed a network. Farmers traded patch files on USB sticks. Trucking co-ops pooled money for a single authorized interface that could validate dozens of rigs once a month. A few tech-savvy kids wrote open-source drivers that emulated dealer servers. Their code spread like a rumor promising access. It worked enough of the time. Still, manufacturers kept tightening. They pointed to safety incidents where unauthorized repairs caused malfunctions. They used regulators and lawyers, and they sold a narrative. Modern trucks were too complex, their safety too delicate to be trusted to amateurs. They offered convenience, streamlined service, remote diagnostics, subscription features, and many accepted it. The quiet of the trucks became both a comfort and a cage. In the end, it wasn't a single law or one ravenous corporation that had made pickups unrepairable. It was 1,000 small decisions, a sealed panel here, a licensing fee there, a warranty that expired on a Tuesday, and a software patch that arrived on Wednesday. It was the accumulation of convenience traded for control. On a late autumn afternoon, Ed handed Marcus the keys to a truck that looked the same as the one he had driven in, its bumper whole, headlights bright. Marcus put a hand against the hood as if feeling for a pulse. The engine answered with that moderated, inhuman whisper. Marcus laughed, half relief, half resignation. "You fixed it?" he asked. Ed shrugged. "For a little while," he said. "She'll be whole till they decide she is." Marcus nodded, starting the truck. The dashboard glowed, and the vehicle hummed forward into the open road, quiet and perfect, and if you knew how to listen, locked.